Harney. The time now is 11 minutes to 8.
We have a spending review next week in which there is going to be a change that sounds as dry as dust but may have very real impact on lives. The Treasury is going to assess the value of big projects differently. The return on investment that it currently demands before something goes ahead is going to be altered. The thinking is that the current system favours richer areas, many of them in the south, where the financial returns seem to be higher. In a moment, we will talk to Jake Berry MP, who's chair of the Northern Research Group of Conservative MPs, about that change and other matters as well. But first, let's turn to Diane Coyle, who's Bennett Professor of Public Policy at the University of Cambridge. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Just talk us through, it's the Green Book, isn't it, this thing is called. Talk us through why the change is a good idea.
The Green Book is sets out the techniques that government have to use allotments to invest in big projects. And what they are announcing is that part of the appraisal process now will be it has to align with key government policies, whether that's levelling up or investing in green infrastructure. If you don't have that kind of prioritisation, what you end up with, and we have ended up with, is that all the investment has gone to London and the South East because they're already very prosperous areas, and if you're going to do more investment there, it looks like a good return. And so you need to counteract that with a different sense of prioritisation. So I think this is a completely sensible and long overdue change in the way it's done.
And it'll make a real difference.
It will do, and of course it depends on the amount of money that gets spent, and we're in a bit of an economic hole at the moment, so there needs to be a lot of spending going on. But it should make a real difference in the geographic location of the investment that happens.
And it matters not just for very big ticket things, but smaller ones as well, presumably.
It gets applied to all significant changes, so it could be anything from a new road bypass to a big rail infrastructure project.
The bigger picture, which you mentioned there, and we're going to see a lot of headlines about this next week at the same time as the spending review, we're going to see headlines about debt. To what extent does it matter that we are borrowing huge sums of money, and to what extent can we carry on doing that in the months, indeed the years ahead?
We have to carry on in the months ahead because nobody in the private sector is going to start growing their businesses again until there is some sign of recovery and some sign of investment from the government. The government has to take the first steps. And it's much too early to start worrying about what the level of debt is. Over the longer term, what matters is can the government continue to afford paying the interest on the debt? Interest rates are very low at the moment, and they have very sensibly locked in low interest rates in the kinds of debt that they've been taking on. And the best way to bring down that ratio over the longer term is to get the economy growing, because it is a ratio. It's how much debt is there over how big is the economy. The economy has been shrinking quite substantially. We need to get it growing again, and that is really going to take government investment and government job creation.
I mean, how do we assess what the sensible limits of what we can borrow are then? Because, I mean, you might sort of, to take what you've just said, you might say, well, let's borrow, if we can borrow at these very low interest rates and we can fix them for quite a long amount of time, let's just borrow and borrow and borrow. How do we know when we're borrowing too much?
The Treasury ought to be thinking about rules over the medium term that give people some confidence they're not taking on too much. I would think about it in terms of what proportion of government spending do you want to go on debt interest payments, and work backwards from that. And that gives us, at the moment, really quite a lot of headroom in the government taking on more debt.
Diane Coyle, Professor of Public Policy at the University of Cambridge, thank you very much.